Hello, how you guys doing? Be with you in a minute here. I'm trying to get myself situated here. Well, hope you're staying warm out there. Can't wait till this frigid cold go away. Um, but anyway, I want to show you this video. Uh, might be try not to make it too long about the cost of racism. Let's start with this.
Racism is expensive.
Shout out to his channel.
Welcome to Dark Faith, where we explore the hidden depths of scripture, history, and modern realities to uncover truths that challenge, inspire, and transform. Today, we dive into a powerful revelation about the staggering economic and spiritual costs of systemic racism. A story that connects ancient biblical narratives to the urgent issues of our time. Let's begin with a number that demands your attention. $16 trillion. Let that number truly resonate with you for a moment. This staggering figure represents an estimated $16 trillion in economic losses for the United States over the past 2 decades. Not stolen by a foreign adversary or squandered in a misguided conflict, but forfeited due to deeply entrenched systemic biases. These losses stem from discrimination based on skin color, imposing what can be seen as the most burdensome economic burden in human history, a burden we can describe as the cost of racism. Consider the profound implications when such biases evolve into obstacles that impede collective advancement, when structures intended to constrain one community ultimately undermine the prosperity of all, and when the foundational pillars of the world's leading economy begin to falter not from outside pressures, but from long-standing internal inequities we have yet to fully address. At this very instant, as you engage with this video, projections indicate that the American economy continues to forfeit millions of dollars every second, not solely from flawed policies or international rivalry, but from an entrenched framework rooted in misconceptions that devalue individuals based merely on melanin levels. And here is the insight that powerful interests may prefer to remain obscured, the reality that will stir deep emotions within you and awaken a sense of profound urgency. This narrative extends far beyond economics. It echoes a tale inscribed in sacred texts millennia ago, a chronicle of identity, heritage, and a people's integral role in divine redemption that has been methodically obscured, altered, and concealed beneath layers of deliberate misinterpretation over centuries. Citigroup, one of the foremost financial powerhouses on Wall Street, took an extraordinary step in recent years by publicly acknowledging what others have long hesitated to voice. That systemic racism is not only ethically indefensible, but also profoundly damaging to the economy, affecting every segment of society. Welcome to Dark Bible Stories, a space where we delve into truths concealed in plain view, unearth narratives that influential entities hoped would remain undiscovered, and draw connections between timeless scriptures and contemporary inequities. Before we explore this profound insight further, I invite you to participate by commenting below with your viewing location, allowing us to gauge the global reach of this message. Whether you are in Atlanta, Los Angeles, Chicago, London, Lagos, or Hanoi, share your city now, as this challenge transcends American borders. It is a worldwide veil of omission that we lift today. Subscribe to the channel, for the revelations ahead will transform your understanding of the Bible, economics, justice, and the true alignment of divine purpose. Enable notifications to ensure you catch every upcoming disclosure without missing a beat. With that, let us proceed. Following this presentation, your perspective will shift irrevocably. You will view the American economy through a renewed lens. You will approach your Bible with fresh eyes. You will no longer remain passive during services. I am about to reveal elements that will challenge the core of your prior teachings. We will uncover the authentic toll of discrimination, extending beyond monetary figures, though we will address those immense trillions, to encompass human worth, inherited wounds across generations, and doctrinal distortions spanning centuries. You will encounter admissions from America's leading financial entities, those that have at last recognized how their practices of exclusion and bias against black entrepreneurs and families constitute the costliest oversight in economic annals. You will uncover scriptural insights intentionally omitted from religious education, verses placing African individuals at the heart of divine redemption, alongside prophets, wedded to figures of authority, and rescuing those chosen to convey sacred messages. You will discover how original texts were manipulated, records eradicated, and depictions fictions altered to bolster a falsehood that rationalized humanity's most lucrative injustice. The transatlantic slave trade was more than an economic mechanism. It represented a profound doctrinal deviation, necessitating the reconfiguration of holy writings. And this is the essence that demands your attention, the reason to absorb every moment of this discussion. This transcends history. It pertains to the present. It concerns the projected $5 trillion in further losses over the next 5 years, without intervention. It involves whether your descendants inherit deception or authenticity, whether you join the cohort that shatters these bonds or one that refines and transmits them to successors. You are on the verge of examining records, statistics, verses, and acknowledgments that influential figures labored for ages to suppress. The proof is irrefutable. The ramifications are immense. Your reaction will shape the legacy you leave as an ancestor. Prepare yourself. This will provoke discomfort. This will evoke indignation. Yet that indignation, that principled resolve, is precisely the force required to dismantle the barriers of inequity that have encircled truth, fairness, and the divine realm itself. Let us commence with the financial aspect, the admission emerging from the epicenter of American fiscal influence, Citigroup's analysis that reverberated through corporate suites and decision-making chambers alike. In September 2020, Citigroup issued a study that merited headline coverage across every major outlet, dominating broadcasts and igniting a nationwide dialogue. Instead, it was sidelined, downplayed, and swiftly overlooked by much of the mainstream press. Entitled Closing the Racial Inequality Gaps, the document featured a figure so vast that its compilers verified their computations repeatedly. $16 trillion. This quantifies the economic shortfall the United States endured over the preceding 20 years, attributable to racial bias, not billions or millions, but trillions. For context, this equates to approximately 25% of the nation's gross domestic product. Envision a hostile power assaulting America and obliterating a quarter of its output. It would be deemed warfare, prompting full mobilization. Yet when this erosion originates internally from ingrained discriminatory frameworks, it scarcely registers. Allow me to delineate the allocation of these absent funds, or more precisely, where they failed to materialize. $13 trillion vanished because black entrepreneurs were denied business financing. Reflect on that magnitude. $13 trillion in enterprises never launched, inventions unrealized, employment ungenerated, all due to lending officials dismissing applicants based on appearance alone. The study indicated that equitable loan access for black-owned ventures over those 20 years would have yielded 6.1 million additional positions, elevating 6.1 million households from poverty and granting 6.1 million avenues for advancement that were willfully withheld. The compensation disparity, $2.7 trillion in foregone earnings, as black employees receive lower pay than white counterparts for identical roles, qualifications, and tenure. This concerns not aptitude, but prejudice, imposing cost on society at large. Real estate, the figures are equally stark. $218 billion forfeited from mortgage denials at elevated rates for black households, inflated interest when approved, and diminished property appreciation even in comparable areas. Research from Princeton demonstrated that property values decline upon black families' arrival in a locale, not from their conduct, but from biased views to pressing market demand. Education incurs losses between $90 and $113 billion due to barriers in higher learning access for black students, despite evidence that anonymized applications reveal equivalent or superior performance. Yet obstacles persist, capping earnings and constraining overall economic scale. Now consider the even more alarming extension. Citigroup not only assessed historical deficits, but forecasted ahead, concluding that unaltered discriminatory structures would cost the United States another $5 trillion in the ensuing 5 years. This transcends ethical pleas or civility. It embodies unyielding economic truth from a global financial titan. Underscoring that bias exacts a steep toll, with all bearing the burden. Raymond McGuire, Citigroup's vice chairman and report co-author, articulated a striking point. We have a responsibility to provide an economic perspective on the costs of long-standing racial inequality. This analysis highlights that the tariff is imposed on us all. Consider that once more. This tariff is imposed on us all. A tariff functions as a levy, implying racism acts as an unspoken assessment every American endures, knowingly or not. White households incur it through stunted growth, black households through denied merits. All forfeit except a select few profiting from stasis. Embedded in the report is a pivotal admission. Citigroup owns its role in this. Institutions like Citigroup facilitated loan rejections, enforced redlining, and imposed higher rates on black clients, now conceding it was erroneous both morally and fiscally. They inflicted self-harm while faulting those affected. Another Citigroup leader stated it candidly. Racial inequality bears an exaggerated expense, presumed borne solely by marginalized groups. This report emphasizes the tariff's universal application. There it emerges again, affirming collective suffering when inequities persist. Yet Citigroup stands not isolated. The International Monetary Fund, a preeminent global economic body, issued a contemporaneous study with equally condemning findings. Examining nations like France, Brazil, South Africa, and the United States, they identified consistent patterns. Racial bias diminishes economies, curtails expansion, stifles creativity, and maintains unnecessary poverty. IMF analysts noted, a less biased society can foster greater economic strength. Absorb that assertion. It originates not from advocates or officials, but from experts charting worldwide trends, driving solely by objectives of development and steadiness. They declare bias equates to economic self-sabotage. Pause briefly with me to contemplate. What do these revelations signify? What are their broader effects? They imply every American, irrespective of ethnicity, is less affluent today than if equity had prevailed over bias. Your savings diminish, your offspring's prospects contract, your locale's assets dwindle, all from prioritizing hierarchy over rational economics. Many assume bias solely impacts black communities, but that notion has profited a narrow elite. Reality reveals bias as a broad economic detriment, indiscriminate and collateral. Absent 6 million roles, no demographic claims them. Sluggish growth stagnates all wages. Suppressed ingenuity deprives society of advancements. Bias constitutes not an isolated concern, but a national dilemma with primary victims, shared enablers, and widespread repercussions. McKinsey & Company, a leading consultancy, analyzed that racial and ethnic disparities cost the U.S. $51 trillion from 1990 to 2021, exceeding China's GDP, or U.S. billionaires' wealth tenfold. The wealth disparity narrates this personally. Median white families hold $284,000. Black, $44,000. Not minor or attributable to choices/culture, but a 10-1 divide from foundational barriers. Critically, this chasm has expanded from $100,000 in 1992 to $154,000 by 2016, despite rights laws, affirmative efforts, and post-racial rhetoric. Why? Wealth mechanisms, home ownership, enterprise, investments, learning, retain bias. Approaches evolved, no overt signs, yet outcomes persist, tactics shift, results endure. Loan denials pivot to biased credit metrics, redlining to zoning exclusions, over to implicit prejudice. The issue adapts concealment. Federal Reserve data reveals 80% wealthiest black homes lag median white, top 20% black families, 4/5 below average middle-class white. Not coincidence or misfortune, but intentional design. Princeton studies on valuations uncover outrage for fair market believers. Black entry depresses values not from action/crime/upkeep, but prejudice demand reduction among buyers avoiding proximity. Markets harbor bias, penalizing black home ownership ambition. Ramifications extend, stagnant appreciation hinders equity borrowing for ventures/education/crises. Trajectories alter not by deeds, but devaluation from skin. Each lost dollar, role, enterprise, appreciating asset embodies an admission, leading economic bodies now echo activists' decades-long assertions. Bias is ethically flawed and economically ruinous, the priciest historical blunder, ongoing as you view. And in this year of 2026, as the Trump administration has implemented sweeping cuts to programs supporting economic equity, such as ending funding for minority health offices, minority-owned businesses, and environmental justice initiatives, according to reports from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, we are seeing the direct consequences with the racial wealth gap continuing to expand. Where median white families hold over $1 million in assets, while black families average around $211,000, according to the Federal Reserve's 2003 Survey of Consumer Finances, updated, and this becomes even more urgent as Trump's tariff policies are driving up living costs, with economists from Moody's forecasting a potential recession that could result in millions of job losses. particularly affecting communities of color already disadvantaged, by the elimination of the federal minimum wage for contract workers from $17.75 per hour, pushing hundreds of thousands of families deeper into poverty. And you cannot help but ask whether we are witnessing a historical reversal, where achievements like the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which aimed to end discrimination based on race, are now challenged by executive orders viewing equity as reverse discrimination, causing the entire U.S. economy to suffer additional trillions in losses over the coming years, if no immediate change occurs. But here's where the story gets even deeper. Here's where we connect these economic confessions to something far more ancient and far more significant. Because while banks were denying loans and economists were calculating losses, there was another theft happening simultaneously. A theft of identity, a theft of history, a theft of biblical truth that had to be erased in order to make economic exploitation seem acceptable. Even godly, you see. You can't build an economic system based on the dehumanization of an entire race without first providing a theological justification. You can't enslave millions of people, work them to death, separate families, and steal generations of labor without first convincing yourself and everyone else that God approves. And so, the Bible itself had to be weaponized, twisted, and whitewashed to support the most profitable lie in human history. Let me take you back to a story that most preachers skip right over. Numbers 12. Moses, the great liberator, the man who led Israel out of Egypt, the prophet who spoke with God face to face, had a wife. Her name isn't mentioned in this passage, but the text is crystal clear about one thing. She was a Cushite woman. Cush, ancient Cush, modern-day Ethiopia and Sudan, Africa. Moses married an African woman, and his own siblings had a problem with it. Numbers 12. 1 says, Miriam and Aaron began to talk against Moses because of his Cushite wife, for he had married a Cushite. Now the text doesn't spell out explicitly that their objection was racial, but the context makes it clear. They didn't object to his first wife Zipporah. They didn't object to anything Moses did, until he married this African woman, and suddenly his own brother and sister were complaining, questioning his authority, undermining his leadership. But here's what happens next, and this is where it gets powerful. God shows up, not to mediate, not to find a compromise, not to gently suggest that maybe everyone should just get along. God shows up angry. Verse 9 says, The anger of the Lord burned against them, and he left them. The presence of God departed from the camp because of their racist objection, and when the cloud lifted from above the tent, there stood Miriam, leprous like snow. Let that image sink in. Miriam objected to a black woman, and God struck her with a disease that turned her skin white as snow. The symbolism is almost too perfect. You have a problem with dark skin? Let me show you what happens when skin becomes the issue. You want to make this about color? Here's your color. Aaron immediately begs Moses to intercede, and Moses, showing more grace than most of us would, cries out to God, Please God, heal her. And God does. After she's been humiliated outside the camp for 7 days, the entire nation of Israel had to wait because Miriam let racism poison her heart. God literally stopped the journey to the promised land to make a point about bigotry. Now, here's the question that should haunt every preacher who skips this passage. How many sermons have you heard about Numbers 12? How many Sunday school lessons covered this story? How many paintings have you seen of Moses with his Cushite wife? How many nativity plays include this detail in the Moses narrative? The silence is deafening. And it's not an accident, because if people knew that God himself took sides against racial prejudice, if people knew that God stopped an entire nation's progress to discipline racism, if people knew that Moses, the great liberator, loved and married an African woman, it gets a lot harder to use the Bible to justify slavery.
Yep. Guess what? Look what we have today. Give you a couple examples.
Grant Cardone just said the quiet part out loud. You're a white male in America, born in this country, and you ain't rich. You just don't want it. Which was 100% a Freudian slip, kind of like the Joe Biden poor kids one. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. These days, I don't know what Grant Cardone is supposed to be classified as anymore. A salesman, investor, guru, scammer, maybe all the above. I'll never forget. These guys paid $12,000 each to sit in that chair. Oh, bruh.
$12,000. I got very upset watching the video we're about to watch together. Actually, angry. I might
advice I've ever seen given to young entrepreneurs, anybody thinking about their finances, and that's saying a lot.
But if you don't know Grant, a few years back, he was really influential. I actually read and was really motivated by his book 10X Rule, which was all about thinking big, expanding goals, and going harder.
You should put money in the marketing. You should promote yourself, not put money in where you and the kids live. Your house does not make you money. Promote, promote, promote. If I died today, Elena and the kids will not have to worry about money.
Then around 2015-16, he showed up on the Bigger Pockets podcast, which is a real estate pod that I was listening to back when I was really building my real estate portfolio.
It's like, I mean, the money's so cheap right now.
Yeah, really quick on these on the properties you're buying. Obviously, you're buying larger properties. Where are you finding them? How are you learning about them? Is that just through the agents that you speak to, or?
Yeah, I mean, people know me as a closer. You know?
And again, the dude was inspiring and entertaining. He kind of came across like he was coked up. But not everything he said was factual or even made sense to most people. But his energy and drive to build wealth was contagious, at least for me. And I never really followed Grant too closely after that. But apparently somewhere along the line, he turned into a complete meme.
If I made $400,000 a year, I would be embarrassed with myself as a husband, a father, basically as a human being. $400,000. How do you make sense of $35,000 a month? You guys haven't done the math. You have not done the math because you cannot live on $400,000 a year.
To the point that he now comes across like a completely out of touch rich guy who's just saying stuff for shock factor to get clicks.
Every 15-year-old kid should be doing this right now. If you're getting an allowance of $300 a month, buy a piece of real estate that pays you $30 a month. Only use the 30. Don't touch the 300.
But how would a young, normal person get money?
Allowance, side jobs, side hustles. I was 14 years old. I was working every weekend. I was mowing lawns, doing whatever I could to get some extra money.
Hey, pal, you just blowing from stupid town? Not to mention, dude is super MAGA. MAGA! The MAGA people! The MAGAs! That's right, I'm MAGA! But he says something that I really find interesting when it comes to the opportunity to build wealth, which is getting in certain doors, having relationships with certain people, and how easy it should be. Which to me all speaks to inherent white privilege.
Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start. But I'm Jew. Welcome to the channel. Please like and share the video. Don't forget to sub. Now, let's get into it. You're a white male in America, born in this country, and you ain't rich. You just don't want it. You must be turning it away. I don't care if you're a fireman, a policeman, a nurse, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, construction worker, roofer, HVAC. If you're not getting rich in America, it's because you don't want to get rich.
So what he's saying, whether it's incidental or not, is if you're white, the playing field is already leveled to your side for you to have advantages over everybody else. Because that's the only reason he singled out white men or white people specific. But it's rare to never that we hear a white person actually say it.
It's here, man. Got plenty of opportunities. You're white. You're allowed in any room. To the other races, you guys should also get rich.
He had a full Joe Biden moment. To the other races, you guys should also get rich.
We have this notion that somehow if you're poor, you cannot do it. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. Wealthy kids.
It's the Freudian slip.
Black kids. Asian kids. It really is. Think how we think about it.
Green kids. Purple kids. Joe Biden was about to go down the rainbow.
But dumb it down. They can do anything anybody else can do, give it a shot.
Because there's proof and validation of too many people that come here that don't look like me that actually get rich.
He's talking about immigrants specifically. So I went to look up what specific benefits some immigrants may be up for. I went to the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which speaks to a certain type of immigration process. But you may be eligible for federal mainstream benefits, such as assistance through temporary assistance for needy families or supplemental security income, health insurance through Medicaid, and food assistance through SNAP. You may also be eligible for cash assistance, medical assistance, employment preparation, job placement, English language training, and other services offered through ORR. ORR provides funding to state governments, resettlement agencies, and other nonprofit and community-based organizations to provide benefits and services to eligible individuals. You can look at some of this stuff which U.S. citizens aren't even eligible for. And if we're talking about the black community especially, cash assistance, medical assistance, employment employment preparation, and job placement. How many people struggling in the U.S. could benefit from that but aren't eligible for it? To be clear, black people have been far behind white people when it came to building wealth due to slavery in and of itself. Because black labor during slavery, during those 250 years of slavery, was completely free, which means white slave owners and every other institution that benefited from that free labor were allowed to make money and build wealth based on free labor, while black people weren't allowed to own anything and weren't free. In the year 2000, economist Robert S. Brown calculated that the income produced by enslaved people for their white owners prior to 1860 was between 1.4 trillion and 4.7 trillion in modern money. And when there was a slight hope of catching up through reparations, the government reneged. In 1865, at the conclusion of the Civil War that ended slavery, free slaves were promised 40 acres and a mule to build an economic future for themselves. But the government reneged on that deal, and black Americans started their free lives empty-handed. Imagine starting completely over from scratch. No money, nowhere to live, no education, no real work experience other than working in a field. Having to start over while the world around you just continues to move. By some estimates, that land will have been worth as much as $3.1 trillion today. Don't ever let anybody gaslight you that we're crying when we talk about slavery or the injustices that black people have had against them, especially when it comes to economic disparity. But the part that isn't really discussed too often, instead of black people receiving reparations that we were promised, they gave those reparations to white people. Just as free slaves were being denied the land promised to them, the U.S. government provided a wealth-building stimulus that overwhelmingly benefited white Americans. The Homestead Acts of the 1860s were meant to help settle the American West. Black people weren't excluded, but few had the resources to migrate, clear land, and set up farms. Kind of like how black soldiers or black veterans weren't excluded from the GI Bill because by law they had the GI Bill, but there were no American institutions that allowed them to use the GI Bill for schooling or buying a house because of Jim Crow. So when they took those GI Bills to banks to pay for school, to buy a house, they were denied, even though they legally had the GI Bill. It's estimated that about 15% of Americans today are descendants of mostly white original homesteaders who were granted 270 million acres of land, a tenth of the country's area, mostly seized from Native Americans. And when black people do build something, what little wealth black families were able to build after the Civil War was often violently destroyed. In a massacre in 1921, mobs of police officers in Tulsa, Oklahoma, burned down what was known as Black Wall Street, obliterating $200 million in homes and businesses and displacing 10,000 black residents. And we know that's not the only massacre when black people build something for themselves.
It's a picture of all the black massacres that have occurred in America, and these massacres have occurred in black towns. Every time we created a town or safe space, it was burned down or all but destroyed by.
Started this business in the closet of my mom's house. Now we.
But they don't. They want to keep this hidden. They want to brush this over. But if you put this facts up when Charlie Kirk, he would try to speak that. And other people to this day, that's why I look to him as a hero, because he can stand up for that, and other people follow their mindset, and they don't understand what they deny onto us. They reaping the curse that's going to fall on them because they're in denial.
So sick and tired of hearing about privilege. Privilege isn't being white, bonehead. Privilege is living in government housing and calling people oppressors while they pay your bills. Get it? I'm done pretending that any of this makes sense.
You were never a slave, and I was never a slave owner. We go out every day and we bust our ass because nothing is handed to us. And there will be nothing handed to us.
A lot of people hear white privilege and immediately think someone is saying white people never worked hard or never went through anything difficult in their life. That's not what that means. White privilege is not about individual pain. It's about the default treatment you receive before you do anything at all. They see who the system is quick to protect and who they're comfortable just throwing away. Y'all gotta understand something. A lot of people misunderstand white privilege because they're looking for something obvious. They're expecting it to look like money being handed out, or jobs just falling into their laps, or life just being easy across the board, right? And when they don't see that, then they just assume that the whole idea of white privilege is either fake or heavily exaggerated. But that's not how it actually works. White privilege usually does not show up as some obvious reward. Most of the time, it shows up in what you don't experience. It's the problems that never land on your radar in the first place. It's extra steps that you don't even realize other people are taking just to be treated normally. For example, just moving through public spaces, being in a store, walking through a neighborhood that you don't live in, being in a nice area at night.
That's mine. I have a receipt. That's mine. That's not it, bro. What you mean? How much in the bag? Bet your job on it. Show me. Bet your job on it. Bet your security job on it. Hold it. Yo. Your job is on the line. You know that, right? Okay. Give me my shit, nigga. What is wrong with you?
Well, I came into an auto zone, and this young lady decides that she wants to follow me around and says that I'm not allowed to bring my book bag into the store. A grown man unable to bring a book bag in the store.
For a lot of white people, none of that comes with extra thought. You're not scanning the room to see who's watching you. You're not changing how you walk, talk, or move around so you don't look suspicious. You're just allowed to exist. For black people, those calculations happen constantly. Not because we want them to, but because experience teaches you what can go wrong if you don't. And that difference matters because it affects how relaxed you are in the world. It affects how confident you feel. It affects how much mental energy you have to use just to get through normal situations.
Unwritten black commandment you sick and tired of following.
Code switching. I work for LADWP. And I'm a procurement agent there. So yeah, I have to code switch.
People would be like, oh, why are you mad? And it's literally just me not code switching and me not faking enthusiasm. Like, it's literally me just being calm and mellow. Like, not the fake, ha ha ha, the fake laughs after every sentence, the exclamation point.
And the same thing shows up in professional spaces too. White folks are usually assumed competent unless they give a reason not to be. Black folks feel like we gotta prove ourselves just to get neutral treatment. You walk in knowing that one mistake can confirm something that somebody was already thinking. So the margin for error is much smaller. And when mistakes happen, the response usually is not the same. When a white person messes up at work, it's more likely to be treated as a learning experience, right? Just a bad day, a temporary slip up. But when a black person messes up, a lot of times there's this unspoken weight on it. Like it says something deeper, you know? Like it confirms a story that somebody already had in their mind. And that difference doesn't always come from somebody being openly racist. A lot of times it's unconscious, but either way, the outcome is still the same. White people are less likely to be seen as suspicious just for being somewhere. You're less likely to be followed around a store like you're about to steal something. And they're less likely to be assumed unqualified before they even open their mouths. When they mess up, people are much quicker to call it a mistake, not a character flaw and not a reflection of their whole community. To people who don't experience this, it looks small, it's petty, it's not that deep, right? But when it happens over and over again, it starts to add up. Those assumptions decide who gets hired, who gets patience, and who gets grace. They decide who's allowed to learn on a job and who's expected to already be perfect coming in. And when you never have to think about any of that, it's real easy to convince yourself that it doesn't exist. One of the other things that people don't like to talk about is how differently other people are allowed to exist in this country. And I don't mean that in some abstract way. I'm talking about how daily actions are interpreted depending on who you are. White people are generally allowed to exist as individuals. What they do stays attached to them. If they mess up, it's their mistake. If they succeed, it's their win. The story starts and ends with that specific individual. But for most black people, it does not work that way. When something goes wrong involving a black person, it almost never stays isolated. It gets stretched and it gets generalized. One person's actions start to look like proof of something bigger. All of a sudden, it's not about what happened anymore. It's about what people think it means about all black people as a whole. And you see this play out in the media all the time. When a white person commits a violent act, the conversation immediately shifts to their mental health, their upbringing, or what they were dealing with in their past. There's an effort to explain the reasoning behind it, to kind of humanize it, you know?
A. Adam Lanza shot and killed 20 first graders and 6 educators. The report says he had profound mental, emotional, and developmental challenges.
He had a history of mental illness and had become physically aggressive, throwing a chair and glass across the room.
Hard was experiencing an acute mental health episode in the months before Wednesday's massacre.
But when a black person commits a crime, the framing changes. Now it's about crime stats, culture, neighborhood, and what's wrong with the black community.
How does 13% of the population commit 50% of the crimes?
Why do we always see the perpetrator being black?
Y'all gotta understand, none of this requires somebody to wake up and just decide to be racist. A lot of this is conditioning. It's how people have been taught to interpret behavior. And over time, those interpretations become automatic. And what makes it heavier is the pressure that creates. When you know that you're not being judged as yourself, you move differently. You gotta watch your tone. You gotta measure your reactions. You think twice before speaking. Not because you're fake, but because the consequences of being misunderstood are much higher. And that kind of self-monitoring is very exhausting. I personally stopped doing that a long time ago. I used to do it when I was younger, but at a certain point, I've really just stopped caring. I'm gonna be honest. Like I said before, when white people mess up, there's usually some space to separate the action from the person, right? They get a lot of grace. But for black people, that separation usually doesn't exist. That action becomes your identity. And that's exactly why certain narratives stick so easily. It's easier to believe stereotypes when people are already being reduced to them. It's easier to justify unequal treatment when you can convince yourself that it's about groups, not individual behavior. It's also why black success can feel threatening to some people, because it challenges the ideas that negative outcomes are personal or cultural. Really think about that. It forces people to confront assumptions that they've been comfortable with. And instead of adjusting those assumptions, some people just push back. Being seen as an individual is a privilege. You gotta understand that. Not because it makes life perfect, but because it gives you grace, space to fail, space to grow, and space to exist without the judgment of an entire group on your shoulders. And when one group gets that space consistently while another group doesn't, the outcome is never random. It's predictable. This is one of those things that a lot of people don't notice until you really put it in front of their face, right? Because belonging is rarely said out loud. Nobody really wakes up and says, you don't belong here. Some people do if you got the balls to do it, but most people don't. It shows up in small stuff, like the looks, the questions, the assumptions, the hesitation. You know what I'm talking about. The way certain people get challenged in spaces that they're fully qualified to be in.
Imagine this. You're on a full flight from Istanbul, Turkey to San Francisco, and about 3 hours into the flight, they make an announcement asking for a doctor. They're like, if you're a doctor, if there's a doctor on board, please identify yourself. First thing the flight attendant says to you as he comes over, he's like, wait, are you a doctor? He looks at you kind of weird. You're like, yeah, I am. First, he asks again, are you sure you're a doctor? I'm like, yes, I am. And then I pulled out my phone and showed him my work ID, which clearly says my name, says medical doctor on it, or MD, and then says like doctor in huge letters at the bottom. I see that he's pretty reluctant, but he takes me back to where the flight attendants kind of gather, and I meet his colleague, who also then questioned me, are you a doctor? Well, what kind of doctor are you? And I'm explaining to her. Then finally I say, can we just go talk to the patient, what's happening? Mind you, when I'm interviewing the patient or talking to the patient and his mom, the flight attendant is jumping in each time, like telling me, no, it's, I don't, this is what's going on, like interjecting and telling me her own plan, telling me how to ask questions to this specific patient, and I am taken aback. Tell me why I say, I think this kid needs this, and the flight attendant tells me, you know what? No, he doesn't. We'll just wait to see if XYZ happens again, and then we can choose to give it to him. Then I tell her, well, we're supposed to give it to him to prevent XYZ.
So that's what people mean when they say whiteness is treated as neutral. White people can walk in a lot of spaces and their presence doesn't need any explanation. Nobody's trying to figure out how they got there, and nobody's double checking to see if they actually belong in that space. But when black people walk in those same rooms, we're often seen as like an extra layer that got added. And it's not always aggressive. Sometimes it's very subtle. A little too much curiosity, a lot of surprise, a lot of questions, things that white people would not be getting asked. That's not a compliment. That's someone exposing what they really felt before you even opened your mouth. This isn't about black people not being capable. This is about a system that doesn't automatically assume that we are. So even when you're qualified, even when you did everything right, there's still this feeling like you're being assessed just for being there. And that's not insecurity. That's just recognizing patterns. When white people criticize institutions, it's usually framed as independent thinkers, truth tellers, or people just asking the hard questions. But when black people point out the unfair treatment, the response shifts real fast. Notice how the focus shifts off of what's being said to how it's being said. Now it's about tone, about emotion, about delivery. And just like that, the system becomes off limits. Labeling black people as complaining or playing victim is one of the easiest ways to dodge what's actually being called out. It turns a structural problem into a personal flaw. And once that label sticks, ignoring everything else becomes super easy. You don't have to look at the facts. You don't have to look at history. You just discredit the messenger and keep it moving. And that's how narrative control actually works. Not by necessarily proving somebody wrong, but by deciding who's allowed to speak in the first place. Another place white privilege shows up clearly is how racist behavior can be rewarded instead of punished. We've seen it over and over again. White people caught on camera being openly racist, dishing out threats, and harassing people.
I am racist. And you are.
You are an idiot.
I am racist, and I'll say that to the whole entire world. Don't be disrespectful.
You're ruining your life, by the way.
Oh, you're talking about respect? You're talking about respect? You are fired from this place, mother. You're not gonna be working here.
Suck it.
Suck what? Look how you fucking look like.
What's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you? Ugly. Get the fuck out of here.
The type of behavior that doesn't need any type of explaining. And instead of those moments ending with accountability, what usually comes next is a GoFundMe page. It's crazy, right? The story flips almost immediately.
Well, this video proves what the beginning of the video was. This proves it. I had to put it to this video, and a lot of black people come across the video. They go identify with this, and some white people who really understand the truth. But the ones who don't understand, like other people don't understand, I don't see it well. They're just gonna keep being blind and ignorant to it, because they choose to want to be blind. They choose to close their hand. They try to wipe it off of history. They've done it for 2,000 years. But just like I said, just because you try to erase and deny, you can't stop the storms, people. You can't stop the storms from coming. You can't stop the judgments from coming. That was basically, and going back to the Bible, look how the mindset and that the Miriam generation didn't see and go over into the promised land, but it was the Jacob's generation that see until they all died out. If you read your Bible, and when you bring it into perspective, and a lot of people want to leave that out because there are some pastors, black and white, they know about that scripture, but they don't want to touch that. They want to dance around it. And that's something very sensitive, and we don't want to hurt nobody's feelings. Well, whether you want your feelings hurt or not, God ain't about your feelings. Ain't about what it's gonna make a people worse. You think it's about saving your soul or your feelings? I didn't. Before I came to the Lord, it wasn't about my feelings and get my feelings hurt. If it means get my feelings hurt to save my soul, then shall it be. And this is what accountability is, not progress in the community, among all communities. But when you in a hyperspace are able to, it trips me out when he said black supremacist. A black supremacist. How can black people discriminate in those areas of life? When has a black person that have got to position and tell them you're not allowed, we're going to put you on a credit rating, we're going to stop you in banking, any officer that look like myself can harass you because you're white? Tell me what is the equivalent to that. Tell me, is it, and this is what happened, and they act like that the Most High God is going to look out over all of injustice he bring the people to his land, and going to skip over that just to cater to their pattern of their form of Christianity. That's not going to happen. They're going, and judgment has come upon them, and it's, even though God has put Trump in a certain position, even though it's afflicting us in a way, but it's eventually, after they be subjected to all these other people to come and bring back that bondage. That's when he brings in the curse on the white people who think like him. And there are some white people that see it coming around the corner, and they're like, "Hey, I'm not agreeing with this." That's why among white people there's a spiritual warfare, because they know there's the ones that stand on truth and stand on business that say, "No, this is not right. You're not gonna keep practicing," because they recognize this, and they come forth and just telling all people, we set this system up. And then the ones, if you and they have ones that cost them their lives, like black people and other people who stood on righteousness. It's the same spirit as in the land that is doing that now, and this is what we've seen until this day. They fight for what is right. But you're looking at a place that subconsciously will always see race, because it's been embedded in, there's a scripture that whatever feeds the ear gate and the eye gate goes into the spirit. Racism have gone into the spirit so long, it prejudges people, and it's been around for a long time, since the biblical times. It just wasn't black and white and other people, but you see how other groups of people start making assumptions. They come to a land to feel like they could be over people and think that they're going to raise and be over a kingdom of people and oppress them and cheat them and anything. And the Bible said, when my people call up to the heaven and you do them unjustly, then I'm going to bring the just hammer down on you. I'm going to wreck your kingdom. And so that's the moral of the story is. So no matter how high they think they do, I don't care if they are like on an Elon Musk level or Bill Gates level, their kingdom is coming down. Their kingdom is coming down. He's going to take their kingdom away from them, their wealth, their generational wealth. They don't even know it yet. Them the ones that's going to be at the mercy of us, looking at people that look like us, and all those people who think like them is going to be at our mercy. Watch. And what you going to do? Either you serve the at the mercy because when you was in your spirit, or you get tormented for the rest of your life. So take that hatred, all that bitterment, and all that insecurity, and that you didn't want to get rid of it from generations of your family, to hell, because that's where it's going to, trying to justify, and look to a Christ that's going to try to justify you being for your particular mindset of what race is, and being that person who want to persecute other races of people because it don't affect you. And that's what certain people in the MAGA group is going to find out. Their kingdom is coming down, and it's collapsing as we speaking. See, it's not just going to collapse certain people. It's not just because of color or language, whatever. It's affecting them. See, remember when you said that the black Hebrew brothers and black and women was saying that y'all being racist and prejudiced, and now you seen they were black, and they were telling you what was going to come. They told you that we are the true prophet. They were the true prophets that were picked to tell what was going to happen. You didn't want to believe it because you can't stomach the fact that something of color, which is clearly in the Bible, based on skin, telling a different story. So you got to find something that looks fair complected so it can tell you the story. And now you see what 2019, now you see the judgment. And they can keep afflicting the people that look like myself, but judgment keeps going to keep falling right back on them. Every time they do something to us and try to take out some of us, some of them being taken out. Everything that they do is falling right back on them fast, just that's the way it is. And they think, we got them, just like they were in the Bible. But just like Egyptians and all those other civilizations, they fail, trying to oppress and suppress another people because of their language. So for the white Christian nationalists, you need to think about that. Go back and read your Bible. Read it by the Spirit, because that's the only way, not by what your interpretation, but by the Spirit. Because you see the connection from the past. Look at the Spirit of the Most High. It's going to show you what's in the present day truth. Watch what I'm saying. Sorry for this video for being too long, but the message had to be put out to show that, yeah, just because your reality is not like my reality, it's separate. We might have a common bond as far as being the same affliction as far as the days of this world, but trust me, in this country of America, with all the diverse people, the reality of it is the spirit of racism has been here for 400 years. And has passed from generation after generation, and people want to keep going to it. Go in parts of this country, and you'll see people still carry it. And it takes on the two opposite of people, black and white, being in connection, in a relationship, in a marriage relationship. You find out real quick how America really is. It's still the same. It hasn't changed. Even though we all supposed to be God's children, right? Would a white Christian nationalist see it that way? What you think? Take care, be blessed. See you on the next video.